What's up, dudes? Max here. Welcome back to another episode of Real Talk, and I'm talking about some stuff that's been going on within the fighting game community and fighting games in general that I'm pretty attached to and I think needs to be discussed because this is kind of a big one, and it's the success of Street Fighter V. Now, I know what you're immediately thinking. The success of the game can mean a lot of different things between how many people are playing it, how many people purchased it, and how big tournaments are doing. There's actually several factors to contribute whether or not a fighting game is quote-unquote alive or dead, but for the most part, a big thing happened over the last couple of days, and we got the hard sales data, or some pretty good data in regards to how much Street Fighter V actually sold. I was fairly worried about this because the initial sales figures that came through for the game within the first about month and a half or so seemed to be looking that it was going to be under 500,000 units, meaning that Street Fighter V potentially sold less than 500,000 units in its first 2 months or so, which was looking to be very bad for the future of the game itself in terms of content coming down the line, as well as the future, and what's most important to me, Capcom fighting games. I hold Capcom fighting games to a very high standard, and the future games that could come along with it because of how many damn amazing Capcom fighting games exist throughout the past 20 years. Their library just extends beyond and far my reach of imagination, and there are so many games out there that you guys don't even know exist that are absolutely amazing, and I would just love to potentially see something like that happen again without things that aren't just Street Fighter. I'm not talking about only Marvel vs. Capcom. I'm not talking about only specifically things like another Street Fighter 6. I just like them to try some new things, maybe a Capcom vs. Capcom game. And if Street Fighter V didn't sell well, and these were the sales figures that we were initially figuring, then that doesn't look good, especially towards investors that work at Capcom and the people that are making big executive decisions for the future of fighting games with that company. But a big thing did happen. Street Fighter V apparently sold around 1.4 million units, which seems a lot better than we were all expecting back in like March or so. That's a pretty decent sales figure, however, the game did not hit its goal. Initially, they wanted to actually sell a total of 2 million units of Street Fighter V by the end of their fiscal year, which is at the end of March, and that did not happen. Sadly, they didn't hit those figures, and Street Fighter V still sits at about 1.4 million units sold. But if you actually look at this thing even further in the long run, Street Fighter V only shipped that many copies of the game. They didn't indeed sell them. They were posting these sales figures, and the sales figures that we got, which were actually on the Capcom Japanese sales site, it only shows the amount shipped because that actually is what counts towards Capcom the most, because that's what they sold to distributors. It's what they sold to GameStop, Walmart, Toys R Us. That's how many copies of Street Fighter V they bought. It doesn't mean that people are physically holding 1.4 million copies of the game. But either way, it's a lot better than what we were initially thinking. It's not what Capcom wanted, but Capcom is notorious for back in the day setting really high sales standards on all of its games that are just insane, and they'd have to bring that standard down lower and lower and lower every single time, but still they consistently do it. That is one measure of success with Street Fighter V, is how many physical copies went into people's hands, which we do not actually know as of right now. The other thing, which is the biggest topic of this video, is comparing sales numbers to actually what's going on with people playing the game, because unless you guys are directly following what's going on with the fighting game community, been paying attention to registration numbers going on at tournaments, or have been looking forward to how many people are actually competing in Street Fighter V at EVO 2016, it's freaking ridiculous. Numbers are off the chart. The people that are actually joining tournaments, entering the Capcom Pro Tour, their new eSports league for Street Fighter V, is staggering. It's bigger than it ever has been for Street Fighter 4, and Street Fighter V has kind of set this precedent that a ton of people are willing to compete for this game, which is another standard of success. And this is kind of the point of the video. Street Fighter V didn't sell a ton of units, but it's doing super good in terms of fighting game community events. The thing I want the most out of Street Fighter V is there to be future characters down the line, multiple characters beyond the first season we know about, and also more Capcom games in the future, or at least Capcom fighting games. If a fighting game can be successful, not in the general market as much as they wanted, but be super successful within the fighting game community, where its grassroots is and where people are really playing the game consistently, and these are the people that are going to be buying the characters over the long run, if that success can be sustained, then it's something that's completely different than what usual game sales standards are set by. If the fighting game community can support Street Fighter V enough through Capcom Pro Tours and the sponsors they'd get and the amount of people that are watching and everything that goes associated with that, could Street Fighter V still be considered a successful game if that many people are still playing it even though it didn't sell as good? I would like to think that Capcom is already aware of this and they set up the Capcom Pro Tour and are going very eSports with Street Fighter V in anticipation that this is going to happen, that they're going to get trickling sales down the line, so that when those big updates like story modes and versus CPU and the stuff that should have been included at the start is included, that they're ready for that. They were ready for a hit at the beginning so that the long run can be supported by essentially its eSports league that they're building around the Capcom Pro Tour and all the big fighting game community events. All I'm hoping, really, is that that is the case as a result of all this, that Capcom is more focused on the hardcore community this time, instead of directly trying to appeal to the masses in success that's determined by literal unit sales of the game sold. I would even really like Street Fighter V, based on it not hitting its initial sales figures, to kind of take everything in a different direction, maybe down the line after E3, where maybe the core game itself goes free to play and then you have to purchase the characters. It might be something worth investigating depending on how good their DLC sales is for costumes and additional characters that come out down the line, the season pass, etc., etc. I don't know, maybe they're looking at ways to actually change the success of Street Fighter V, because right now, its success is measured in a different way, probably different than any other fighting game to date in terms of popularity, because amongst all these tournaments and the Capcom Pro Tour, Street Fighter V is freaking huge. And just maybe a lot of people don't know this because of how bad the initial launch of Street Fighter V actually was. There's many other games that have followed suit like this, but this is a very unique situation for Street Fighter because it's always the huge and giant popular one. And now, at this point, Street Fighter V has sold less than a game like Street Fighter Cross Tekken. It's a little thing to be worried about, but at the same time, it's something to be very excited about, but it's something I really wanted to update you guys on, because it'd be amazing if we can see direct hardcore success as a result of a fighting game, and maybe, just maybe, other fighters that Capcom could make in the future can rely on the success similar to Street Fighter V, and maybe not the direct unit sales success that we're so accustomed with seeing in terms of video games and how good they do in general. I'm pretty excited about that and the potential future of other Capcom fighters. Maybe even some re-releases of stuff like Power Stone down the line would be amazing if they don't have to sell a ton of units and just directly appeal towards the hardcore audience. Now, as this is wrapping up, I know a lot of you guys are going to say there's so many other fighting games that have found success within their hardcore audiences. Killer Instinct, Skullgirls, Guilty Gear, all these games do not have huge success in terms of actual unit sales, but are extremely popular amongst their super hardcore fighting game communities. And then you have something like Mortal Kombat X, which is one of the best-selling fighting games of all time, and Mortal Kombat mostly relies on the exact opposite of what we're talking about. Direct, casual market sales of somebody that just wants to fill their shelf with a fighting game and just buy it for it to be the fighting game on that shelf. That's not exactly a bad thing, but it's much different than we're all very accustomed to. Either way, guys, thank you a ton for listening. Thank you for watching. I'm really looking forward to the future of Capcom fighting games, especially hoping that there is one. And I'm very curious to see how Street Fighter V is taken from Capcom after E3 when we get more information about the game, hopefully, in regards to future seasons and more content upgrades down the line. My name is Max, and I'll see you next time.